Welcome. You're listening to Temple Talk from the Temple Institute in Jerusalem, Israel. Rabbi Richman here with your best friend and mine, Yitzchak Reuven. Today, the 5th day of Adar Sheni, the second month of Adar, 5776. It's March 15th, 2016. This week, Parshat Vayikra. We begin the book of Leviticus. It's also the second of the 4 special Sabbaths with special additional maftir Torah readings that lead up to Passover. The first having been 2 weeks ago, Shabbat Shkalim. This week is Parshat Zachor. Parshat Zachor features a special additional Torah reading wherein we are enjoined to remember, it's actually a positive commandment, to remember Amalek, to remember what the nation of Amalek did to the people of Israel, to remember that Amalek has to be destroyed. There is an idea of connecting the commandment of remembering Amalek to Purim, which is basically the story of the plot against Israel that was instituted by the descendant of Amalek, who was Haman. So we read the Shabbat preceding Purim, we have the special Shabbat of Parshat Zachor, which means remember. So on Shabbat Zachor, first of all, again, this week we will be reading Parshat Vayikra, beginning a whole new experience of the book of Leviticus. But the additional reading is going to be from the book of Deuteronomy, from Devarim, from Parshat Ki Tetzei, at the end, where we read in 25th chapter of Deuteronomy from verse 17, remember what Amalek did to you on the way when you were leaving Egypt, that he happened upon you on the way, and he struck those of you who were hindmost, all the weaklings at your rear, when you were faint and exhausted, and he did not fear God. It shall be that when Hashem your God gives you rest from all your enemies all around, in the land that Hashem your God gives you as an inheritance to possess it, you shall wipe out the memory of Amalek from under the heaven. You shall not forget! Exclamation mark.
We should not forget to wipe out the memory?
You should not forget. Actually, I was just reading a very interesting commentary which said that you should not forget to hate Amalek. This is a very unusual commandment of the Torah, that God is actually commanding us
to hate.
That we have to hate Amalek, because Amalek represents everything that is absolutely askew and perverse and twisted and mangled and wrong about what can happen to a person, what a person can become.
If they forget to hate Amalek.
If they are Amalek, in other words, and again, we're not talking here. I don't think at this point anyone opines that we're talking even about a particular people. We're talking about a spirit. We're talking about a propensity. We're talking about a set of attributes. When you compare what we just cited at the end of Parshat Ki Tetzei, which is what we're going to be reading this Shabbat, which is the obligatory reading of Shabbat Parshat Zachor, when you compare that to the other passages that we find in Parshat Bishalach of when Amalek attacked Israel after the splitting of the sea, where we find there in the book of Exodus, chapter 17, and verse 14, Hashem said to Moshe, write this as a remembrance in the book and recite it in the ears of Joshua, that I shall surely erase the memory of Amalek from under the heavens. Moshe built an altar and called its name Hashem is my miracle. And he said, for the hand is on the throne of God. Hashem maintains a war against Amalek from generation to generation. And of course, we're all familiar with the Hebrew here of verse 16 that says, Vayomer ki yad al kes ya. Milchama Lashem ba'Amalek midor dor, which literally means that there's a hand on the throne of God, but the word for chair, for throne, is missing a letter, as is the word for God is the shortened version without the first 2 letters. All of this showing that the idea of the hand of Amalek attempting, as it were, to usurp, to unseat God, attempting to blot his presence out from the world, that the idea here being that God's name cannot be complete in this world as long as Amalek is about, because the design, the purpose, the intention of Amalek is basically to destroy God's presence in this world.
And there's a parallel between the passage that you first read from Kitzitze, from Deuteronomy, where it says, your enemies all around you will be defeated. Correct?
Mm-hmm.
That's the exact wording.
When you defeat all
when
your
you
enemies.
defeat the enemies all around you. There's a parallel between that and other passages in Deuteronomy that says when you defeat all your enemies around you, you will build a Beit HaMikdash, the Holy Temple. So there is a connection between destroying Amalek and building the Holy Temple.
In fact, that's the order, that Amalek has to be destroyed before the Holy Temple is built.
And then the Holy Temple can truly be a house of prayer for all nations, because there is no Amalek to disrupt that.
I don't know how all this would go with the liberal mindset, the
multiculturalism,
multiculturalism, the peace lobby, that whole deal. Like, how could you be talking this way about genocide, or about you of all people that have been through so much, your history? How could you be talking like this? This just proves that the Torah is bad and archaic and all this kind of thing. The fact is, a little bit of integrity and honesty indicates that we're certainly familiar with what this idea of Amalek is all about in the world, and what it can do. I think the idea of hearing something, it's very powerful, right? Well, this Shabbat, I mean, it doesn't just mean to hear something, to hear the words, but to hear it like Shema, like to hear, to understand. So this Shabbat, we have an actual mitzvah that we have to hear these words before Purim. We have to hear, we have to remind ourselves, we have to remember, never to forget what Amalek is all about, what it represents, what it is ready to do, what it has done in the past, what it will do. And we have to stop that. And for some people, it's hard to hear. People have a hard time hearing things that, according to Hashem's reasoning, logic, standard of measure, don't necessarily agree with theirs, right? It's all about hearing something on a different level. So we're supposed to hear this, okay. And interestingly, this week we're starting the book of Vayikra, and of course, Yitzchak, we're coming into the book of the Torah now, which is called, by our sages of blessed memory, the heart of the Torah. The Vayikra is called the heart of the Torah, Leviticus, and it's also seen as that, in that there are two books in front of it and two books in back of it, as it were. And our sages say something that is very precious to you, you insulate well, you keep it guarded, as it were, in the middle. The whole point of everything is this book. And so many people find it very, very hard to hear. And of course, our milu, our world outlook is so far from everything that this book is talking about. The majority of the book is talking about the temple offerings, to the extent that people are really uncomfortable with the book of Vayikra. There's going to be, I always joke about this. I mean, in synagogues all over the place now, next few weeks, people are going to be going out early. They're going to be making Kiddush early. They're going to be trying to distract themselves a lot from the uncomfortability, from the invasion of their comfort zone, in the fact that this is really not only part of the Torah, but as we mentioned, it's a whole book, and honestly, it's the center of everything. How do we deal with that? Obviously, when we're looking at it from having been without the temple for 2,000 years, and the world that we grew up in seems to be, this doesn't fit at all. And so this is a whole approach here, okay, rationalize and apologize, as it were, and explain, well, things were different then, and this is what it really means this, and it really means that. You know what? That's not the way I'm going to do it at all. That's not my premise. When teaching Vayikra, our starting point really is that our heads are not on straight altogether, and that we really, really, really don't understand what this is about, because we're looking at it from a completely skewed angle, and that's what we're going to explore a little deeper in our Torah, video Torah portion this week, where we want to speak about the different types of offerings in the temple. But suffice it to say that for so many years don't suffice it to say, rather, for so many years we have been speaking about these tremendous misunderstandings of what the offerings in the Holy Temple are all about, how the word sacrifice is inappropriate, unacceptable, how it's not accurate, how it's not about giving something up or losing something or being deprived. It's not about an attempt to placate or mollify or satisfy some vengeful, wrathful God who won't take it out on us because we're slaughtering an animal in front of him. This is all absolutely not what bringing an offering in the Holy Temple is all about whatsoever. Those are all pagan ideas. That's not what the Temple of Hashem is all about. That's not what the offerings are all about, but yet it is very, very central to our lives because of our own humanity. So I want to start all of this by saying the following, okay? I mentioned about the unique aspect of the Shabbat, of the mitzvah, that we actually have to hear the words that we're going to be reading in Deuteronomy. Don't forget about Amalek. Don't forget that you must never forget that his memory has to be wiped off the face of the earth, under the heavens, right? We have to hear that. We're going to have to hear the Megillah also. The commandment is to hear it, right? Speaking of hearing, right, and the mystery of hearing, Vayikra, the book of Vayikra begins with a mystery, begins with a hearing-related mystery. And you know exactly what I'm talking about, right? It begins with that small aleph in the word Vayikra, one of the small letters in the Holy Torah. The last aleph of the word Vayikra is written in the diminutive, and that is extrapolated and explained in all sorts of ways. But the verse itself reads in a strange way, right? The verse reads as follows: Vayikra el Moshe, Vayidaber Hashem elav me'ohel moed lemor, which is translated as, he called to Moses, and Hashem spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying. And then we begin the book of Vayikra. So this verse begins with something that we are not being told, something that is hidden from the naked eye, something that is clearly between the lines, and something that is being kept from us in a way. Because Hashem called to Moshe, and then he spoke to him. Well, what did he call him?
It's reminiscent of the beginning of Parshat Vayikra, when Avraham is talking to God, and then the three angels appear, and Avraham talks to them, but there's a certain disconnect.
There is a disconnect there, right?
Logical disconnect.
Because he had been talking with God, and then we don't hear anything more about that conversation.
Right. So maybe this is the picking it up generations later.
So in other words, the way this verse linguistically should read is Vayikra Hashem el Moshe Vayidaber elav.
Mm-hmm.
And Hashem called to Moshe and he spoke to him. But instead, it's broken up. And it says, and it's not, and the caller is not even identified. It says, and he called to Moshe. And then all of a sudden it kind of like becomes like, okay, more like public, more that we can deal with. And Hashem spoke to Moshe from the tent of meeting, saying. But there's something intimate, something furtive, something guarded about the first three words, and he called to Moshe. And indeed, the sages speak about this at length, and they speak about the fact that there was like a still small voice that Moshe alone heard that went directly to him. And that was the introduction to Hashem's speaking about all of these things. It was something between them first.
That was the invitation.
That you have to be able to hear. You have to be able to hear it. It's not even explicitly mentioned here. It's not even explicitly mentioned here. And
if you recall, last Parsha, Pekudei, ends with the God's glory filled the Mishkan, the tabernacle, like a cloud, and Moshe could not go in. And now God's saying, you can enter now. Via the vehicle of the communication of my voice, you now have access. And that is what opens up Vayikra. That's what opens up this entire new world.
Right. But yes, and when I'm thinking in connection with what I said in the beginning, that how this is so misunderstood and how it's our whole industry He's basically trying to explain what this is really all about, because it's so elusive, the whole idea of the offerings in the temple. But here, from the get-go of Vayikra, from the first words, basically we're seeing this is not something that is easy to hear. Not everybody's going to hear it. Not everybody can hear it. Like you said, maybe you have to be invited. Maybe Hashem is inviting Moshe, but there is a voice that's going out, and that is hidden. It's Vayikra el Moshe. And he called to Moshe, and Vaydaber Hashem ela. And Hashem spoke to him. But first there was something else that I don't even have it here in my hand to show you. He called to him. And let me tell you what I think this means. What I think this means is that we live in a world today which is just so absolutely overrun by noise. I mean, everywhere that you turn, we have noise, right? It is a cacophony. Am I pronouncing that correctly?
Yeah, love it. Love it. Go for it.
Cacophony means... My computer screen is gone now. I don't have it in front of me. I had it all ready to share with you, so you could get it, because you're connected over there where you're sitting, but I'm not. Give me please the definition of cacophony.
Okay, keep talking for a minute.
All right. It is like a torrent of like being spewed all the time. It's like incessant, if I'm not mistaken. And that's the world that we're in. You know, we are being bombarded all the time by sound, by information, by talk. Most of it useless. It's just everywhere.
A harsh, discordant mixture of sounds.
Okay, that's the world.
Yes.
That we're being bombarded with, this harsh, discordant mixture of sounds, right? But here, there was something like... It's you know what it is? To me, it's like the opposite of synesthesia. It's like there was something so identifiable that only Moshe heard. It's this still small voice. And it's, you know what to me it is? It's the voice of reason. It's the voice of truth. It's the same voice, by the way, that tells us to settle the land of Israel. It's the same voice that tells us to remember Amalek. It's the same voice that is the voice that singles us out, that puts us against the whole world, right? And out of the cacophony of voices that we are being bombarded with in this world, that drives you mad, that beats you senseless, right? The cacophony of falsehood and distraction and mass media falsehood, it beats you senseless. And here Vayikra, which is the heart of truth, which is so hard for people to take, because you have to be so egoless and you have to be so understanding that we are not animals. I mean, stay tuned for the next few weeks, please, listeners. This is what we live for. Sefer Vayikra, this is what we want to indulge you in. Our understanding of what is going on in the Holy Temple. This is what our lives have been leading up until, okay? So we have this cacophony, and the cacophony is like, oh, you know, I understand much more than that. We're not that type of people anymore. We're not in that kind of world anymore. But Moshe hears this voice, right? That's how the book of Vayikra begins. You can't even know what happened. It doesn't say. It says he called to Moshe. Okay, am I missing something? Yeah, you are, because then the verse continues and says, and Hashem spoke to him from the tent of meeting, saying, but wait, he said something before that, didn't he? Yeah, but I'm not telling you that, because that was from Hashem to Moshe. That was to his ear. That's the opposite of the cacophony that you need to be on that page with in order to get any of this. Are you ready to hear that still small voice? It brings obligation. It brings responsibility, like everything else. And you know what I think this also dovetails with beautifully, Yitzchak? The incredible tradition that I think is so timeless and endless. I think every word of our sages is so perfect and so incredibly vast what they're conveying here. Just this one idea of these three words, and that he called to Moshe, not being identified, and the tradition that there's something going on here. It's a small voice. It's a quiet voice that went directly to Moshe, that you need to be able to hear that resonance. and separate yourself from the cacophony in order to understand what's going on. But the other tradition that this dovetails with is the beautiful idea that traditionally in Jewish life, little children begin their Torah study career with this book. Okay. Now, that's not so much the custom anymore. There are some schools of thought that still do that, but most kids begin somewhere in Genesis, okay? But ideally, our sages of blessed memory, the 2,000-year-old tradition, is that you take a little child, like 5 years old, when he's ready to start learning Chumash, right, the 5 books of Moses, and this is what he learns. He learns the book of Leviticus about purity and about the offerings.
Learns how to listen.
Like in the cacophony world, somebody's going to say, oh, that's insane. Like, why is he learning about the offerings in the temple? And this expression that the sages have, so pithy and so succinct, the sages say, and I quote, "Let the pure come and study about purity." And and that is so beautiful, because it doesn't just mean that children are pure and how fitting, and how lovely the idea that, oh, let the pure come and study the pure. No, it's that children are not yet stymied or jaded or prejudiced or scratched in the brain from the cacophony. They are able to see the truth. They are not yet filled with their own ideas of how things should be. When I take the idea of Leviticus and I try to explain to contemporary man, they're like, "Oh, you're not gonna give me this. Are you out of your mind?" But the child is ready to hear it, because the child hasn't yet been taught that he's supposed to think that certain things are wrong. The child hasn't yet been taught what we've all been taught, which is we've been taught how if it doesn't fit within my rubric of what life is supposed to be, I won't accept it. And that's what Vayikra comes. This book now comes and blows apart all of our preconceived notions, all of our expectations, and tells us that we could be living on a completely different footing, and that the divine image of mankind that unfortunately has been so sullied and tarnished, it doesn't have to be like that. That's what the true experience of life in the shadow of the Holy Temple is really all about. So it only gets better and better. Please stay with us, tune the cacophony out, and come right back after this break to Temple Talk.
Shalom and welcome back to Temple Talk. This is Yitzchak Reuven with Rabbi Richman here in our studio in Jerusalem, in Israel, the heart of the universe, and we are talking about and studying the heart of the Torah, the book of Leviticus, Vayikra, as we call it in Hebrew, which is Leviticus, I guess, is some Greek version of the word Levitical. Latin, Levitical, that's in Levites. But, okay, that's a nice general description, I guess. But, of course, Vayikra, and he called, is really what the book is all about. And, Rabbi, you were talking about the dichotomy between the cacophony and the still small voice. Another thing I like to point out is that not long ago, when God spoke to Israel at Mount Sinai, God's voice was not a still small voice. It was a loud, booming voice that everybody could hear, because God had to speak over the cacophony, because God was basically a guest, as it were, in our world, right? He had to speak through all the noise. He had to speak through all the debris and all the flotsam and jetsam of our reality in order to get through to us. Now, we have created for God this space in our world where God is at home in our world, and so God can speak to us in that still small voice and be heard just as loudly and clearly as he was at Mount Sinai.
If you want to, though, that's the thing about the way this verse is phrased.
We have to be attuned to that.
Exactly. The verse is phrased in such an unusual way, because the whole idea really is that it's there. The voice is there. It's not being broadcast on the same frequency as everything else. So I think that you have to be ready for it.
You have to draw near to hear it, and that's the whole
exactly.
idea of the Korbanot, to draw near.
You have to look for it as well. In other words, Moshe was ready, and it was only for him. The voice was only for him, and then he gave it over to the people. It was Vayikra el Moshe. And then Hashem spoke to Moshe from the tent of meeting, saying, these are the things that you're going to say. But first, it was between them. And to me, that represents so much, because it's so easily misunderstood, and it is such a voice against the cacophony.
Yeah. So the whole idea of a korban, all right, an offering, is based on the word lekarev, to draw near.
Kuf
resh bet,
right,
to draw near.
To draw near.
Okay, that's the whole point. And of course, we have to draw near closer, just like when you want to hear someone who's speaking in a quiet voice, you have to draw near to hear them. I mean, part of the problem with our world today is that there's such a cacophony that everybody's world's apart from everyone else because it's so loud. You don't have to be in the same place or on the same page, anything. And that's why, there's such a problem today with all the talkbacks and things, like bullying and cyberbullying, because everybody is in their own world, disconnected from one another, making their own cacophony, making their own noise.
Basically, the talkback thing
is
a way of a person being able to say, this is really only about me.
Right.
So okay,
and
you have your thing, you posted your thing, your life's work, whatever it is, but here's what I have to say about that.
Right. And you know what? Vayikra, Leviticus is all about you and me, because that's basically the point of the Korbanot, is to make a connection.
Well,
to
that's
draw
in general,
near.
That's the metaphor of the whole holy temple, is that
to draw
a
near
home
and to make that connection. Because it's not just
couple.
about you and not just about me. And that's why the holy temple is a place of mifgash, a meeting place for all of man and God, because everybody has to lay their aleph, right? The big aleph that we all have, which is our ego, the big aleph, which becomes a small aleph on the end of the word Vayikra.
Right.
We have to diminish ourselves. We have to diminish who we are to make room and to create the silence so we can hear the other.
That in itself is such a beautiful thing that you just said, that's like the key to understanding the secret of that still small voice. If you look at these words in Hebrew, when you see that small aleph, which is a very unusual tradition, by the way, for those that are less familiar with what we're talking about, that there's a number of letters in the Torah and the actual scroll that ever since time began, ever since the Torah was given, these letters have been written differently, either larger or smaller, and they teach us profound lessons. And it's as if, now the aleph, of course, everybody knows, in addition to standing for Hashem himself, as it does in Adar, as we taught, the aleph is the singular ani, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it's like seen as representing the self. So it's like Hashem is saying, well, if you want to hear this voice, the first point is check your ego at the door. Like, if you even want to hear me, like this is like a completely different level of.
And that's the first instruction for beginning to understand the book of Leviticus. Leave your ego at the door. Leave your notions at the door. Leave your cacophony at the door. If you really want to learn what the book of Leviticus has to teach us, then you have to leave those preconceived notions at the door, because as you explained at the beginning, that's exactly what stops us, and that's exactly what limits us today. And we believe that those noises and that cacophony, which we call ourselves, our ego, that's the reality. But Leviticus says, no, that's not the reality, not at all.
Now, somebody might be listening and say, okay, I get you, I understand. Okay, fine, I understand that the word korban has been mistranslated as sacrifice. That is not about giving something up. That is not about mollifying or appeasing a vengeful God. That it's about coming close. Okay, but this person will say, but for me, I'm sorry, but bringing an animal to the altar in the Holy Temple is not going to do it for me. That's not going to bring me close to God. Okay, therein lies the secret of the ego issue, and some of the things that we want to go into deeper in our video lesson this week. The idea that it's not an easy truth, to grasp, that specifically why the Torah, Hashem, designed this system has so much to do with the very essence of what a person is. and this is the whole problem, really, is that, okay, well, I don't need that to come close to God. Actually, what does it mean to come close to God? And what does it mean to be a human being? That's the whole issue here. That's the whole problem that we are not in sync with, especially looking around in the world. It doesn't take much to understand that we, as a classification, we meaning humanity in general, man, we have no regard for life. We have no sensitivity whatsoever to anything. Everything has been completely blurred and completely changed and completely destroyed as far as what was once thought of as being sacred in terms of life. It's those issues that are being addressed and hopefully corrected through the process of what a person goes through when we bring an offering in the Holy Temple. It's not about God even. It's not about making him happy. It's about something that's supposed to happen within a person. And that's the whole perspective that's missing from contemporary society's understanding of what this is all about.
It's clearing out the cacophony. It's like we're erasing all that noise from our own hard drive when we go into the Holy Temple and engage ourselves in this process, it's a process. It's not a technical thing. The offerings that okay, I bring in my animal and the Kohen comes and he takes care of it, and I can stand there with folded arms and say,
okay, check, you got your atonement now.
Right,
you're good.
right.
You're good to go. That's not it at all, and that's why I'm telling you something, Yitzchak. I could think about this one idea forever, and we could talk about it forever, and we're going to be talking about it much deeper this week also again on the lesson. But I got to tell you, I think the most profound, incredible thing in the world that people just do not appreciate, and I'm sure that unfortunately a lot of our listeners don't appreciate this. For example, the sin offering that's brought in the Holy Temple is for an unintentional sin,
Mm-hmm.
for shogeg. There is no sin offering for an intentional sin. Isn't that unbelievable? So what is this all about? What is the damage caused by an unintentional sin? And that's the only type of offering that you can bring as far as a sin is concerned. But of course, I have to preface this whole incredible revelation with the idea that this whole thing is so misunderstood because people think sin. They think the whole thing about why we need the Holy Temple is because we have no atonement, because we're so full of sin. You have to bring a sin offering. The vast minority of the offerings that are brought in the Holy Temple have anything to do whatsoever with sin. Most of them are an expression of a desire for closeness to God.
It's either thanks or gratitude or appreciation or I made a mistake.
All sorts of expressions.
All sorts. It's the entire human experience. Just like was it Psalm 30 that you like to
Right.
quote, which is Hanukkah Tabai, which is about the dedication of the Holy Temple.
The ups and downs of the human condition.
And that's what it's a language. The Korbanot, the offerings, is a whole language that we speak between us and God, and that's the still small voice in a non-verbal environment.
But some folks have this idea, about like, I'm going to bring an offering now, and he's going to be appeased, and he's not going to zap me, and I'm going to be okay because I did something wrong, and here I'm coming. You don't understand. The offering that you bring because you sinned unintentionally is what you bring. If you sinned intentionally, you can't even bring an offering. That's a different kettle of fish altogether. And that is just so absolutely amazing. In other words, what I'm trying to say is that right away shows you this is not about a get-out-of-jail-free card. Right. This is not about some sort of carte blanche thing. That's not what this is altogether. This is a complex idea of the range of human emotion, capacity, reaction, striving for truth, acknowledgement of my place in the universe. It's a whole different thing. I mean, if only people here in our generation took responsibility for what they did on purpose. And here we're talking about a person taking responsibility for what came about by accident. Because as the sages teach, if a person merited, then we also wouldn't have a takala, a happenstance thing happen through us. It's a vast system of spiritual ups and downs.
So when a person brings their offering, enters the holy temple, enters the courtyards, brings their offering, they're basically bringing their experience, who they are, to a higher level. And the offering that they're making is, God, this is who I am, and I'm here, and we're in the same place. And that is an amazing reality. And a person walks away, leaves that temple uplifted, purified by the very virtue of having stood on the same ground, as it were, with God, while basically, exposing who they are to God. Well, this is what I've done, this is what I've been about, so I did this by mistake, or I just had this amazing thing happen, and I want to thank you. Whatever the occasion, they're sharing it with God on this refined, purified reality. And when you do walk away and re-enter our day-to-day reality, obviously you're entering on a much higher level and a much greater appreciation for the beauty of life. And that's what the temple is all about. It's about life. So the idea, you may say, well, wait a minute, we're doing these offerings and we're taking animals and slaughtering them. Like, it might sound crazy if I were to say, well, you know what, we're slaughtering the animals and we're making offerings, but we're not killing the animals. I don't know how to explain that, but that is the reality. It's not about death. There's no death there.
It's because it's about elevating the life force. It's about the ultimate sanctification of life and sensitivity to life. That's exactly correct. By the way, all this takes place on the sanctified area of the Holy Temple, which again, this space and time and life and the whole concept of that place being, as it were, like the vortex, the secret of the Garden of Eden, the secret of the rectification of space, of sacred space, of the idea of being able to connect as a portal, if you will, to have an experience in this world. It's very real. It's the very physical world, but this is the place that God chose, and this is what it means that He chose that place. That this is a place of revelation. We spoke earlier about Amalek, right, and the whole idea that there is a force that seeks to hide the presence of God and obliterate it, and it takes different forms. And again, we're not talking now about the commandment of obliterating the memory of Amalek as associated with a particular people. You can see how it's something that is a spirit, and it tries to take a stranglehold and usurp the dominion, right? Well, all this is going on in only one place, and that's the Temple Mount, right? So many times in the Torah, Hashem says, "This is the place that I shall choose, the place that I shall show you." And Abraham said, "In the mountain of God, in the mountain God shall be seen." What's going on there now is so much a parody of this. It's like the verse in Ecclesiastes that God created this opposite that, like a realm of evil opposite a realm of good, for us to be able to make free choice. Thinking about this news item that we posted just the past couple of days on the Temple Institute's Facebook page about this Islamic preacher that's a serial inciter literally to kill Jews in so many words, from the Al-Aqsa Mosque, right, from the place that is the holiest to the Muslims in Jerusalem. He's been hanging out there, and he's given these sermons, weekly sermons, to go out and kill Jews. Well, finally, for some reason, the Israeli authorities actually arrested him and indicted him, and he's going to be sitting for 11 months. 11 months or something like that. Interesting. That's how long you say Kaddish for someone. Wow. But anyway, it's amazing. It's amazing what's going on in this very spot right now, and that's why we always say when we go to the Temple Mount and we want to go there in purity and according to halakha, and we're trying to have a transcendent experience and show God how precious this place is to us and how we want to stand up for His honor. We want to be close to that presence, and how we have to use so much of our energies to ward off the negativity that's being pointed at us.
To ward off literally the cacophony that has
Cacophony is exactly what is going on there.
has flooded the Temple Mount these past few years, and of course we're talking about on a literal level the Muslim hired verbal guns who
Thugs and thugettes
who scream and harass and incite against Jews on the Temple Mount. Now, as we've reported the past few months, the police have been keeping them off specifically, and so it's much quieter.
So you and I heard that. We heard
Right.
we heard that report.
We went up last week. We were expecting tranquility.
We heard these reports that it's much easier now. We go up to the Temple Mount just a few days ago. We made a film. It's up. It's
Yes.
posted if you want to see it. And actually, I didn't sense that much difference. Okay, they're not maybe as much in our faces as they were.
Well, they don't follow us around, but by the mosque, there are men and women sitting outside, and
Waiting for us.
obviously, they're volunteers. They're not getting paid, so they can't be accused of being part of this
tzaddikim.
organization, which was made illegal. But they're for their own free will, they sit and scream Allah Akbar and whatever else they scream as we walk by. And the police are very nervous about this. And actually, the police were almost like traffic cops at that point, because they were directing Jewish and Muslim traffic in such a way so we wouldn't possibly, run into one another. It's a bizarre experience.
So we made a short little clip, and I wanted to bless everybody. I wanted to send a blessing from the depths of my heart, feeling so connected, from the Temple Mount, give a blessing. So it just starts to give a greeting, and the cop comes over and says, "Is this about prayer? Are you talking about prayer?"
The cops are clueless, I guess. I don't know. I don't envy them, but it's an absurd situation, and it is the antithesis of what we're describing here in the book of Vayikra.
Yes, and so I'm saying the offerings that are brought in the Holy Temple are for the elevation of humanity, and this incredible paradigm shift of the potential of humanity. And in that very place, you have like this preacher that you posted the news story about, who is inciting to go out and murder Jews. And that's coming from the place of the Shekhinah, from the place of the divine presence, from the place of the rectification of Adam Harishon, that God gave over to Israel the stewardship of bringing this blessing into the world through the divine service. What we have there now is, like you say, the very, very opposite. And it's so amazing that if it wouldn't be that it's so obvious that this is a divine script, it would be disturbing. But
it would be depressing if it weren't the scroll of Ruth, of Esther.
Exactly.
Excuse me, the scroll of Esther. At large. How you say? There's an expression. We're living it. We're living through the scroll. We're living
unplugged.
Unplugged. We're living through the God's presence. And it's the same thing about
everything. If it wouldn't be so obviously divinely orchestrated, everything would be very depressing. And you look around at what's going on in the world. Look around at the tremendous machination and manipulation that the American administration is foisting against Israel now, and President Obama's incredibly
pathological hatred toward our prime minister.
Yes, that's right. His pathological hatred. Not as just. Excuse me. It's not. Don't personalize it to Netanyahu. It's for each and every one of us.
Okay.
He hates each and every one of us equally. Please don't take that away from us and from him. And now that that what seems to be pretty widely acknowledged, what was first reported by the Wall Street Journal, that he's planning on somehow through the United Nations trying to bring pressure on Israel. And then yesterday, another piece I read was Kerry, the Baal Kerry himself, talking about how this has to be a global push to force Israel into adopting the two-state solution. So basically what's going on is like there's a race against time to see how much irreparable damage these incredible haters can leave as a legacy to whatever buffoon or worse inherits the White House now.
How Amalek-like.
Right? And so it goes, and the beat goes on, and you know what?
And
that cacophony, it doesn't even enter my ears.
I mean, you know what? If what's happening in Europe with these migrants, with the violence, with the basic disintegration of European society, what's happening in the United States, the elections, and I don't know who anybody's voting for, but it's scary. No matter who you support, it sounds pretty scary to me. Wouldn't you like a place in the world, even if you had to get in a plane and go there, where you could get away from all that, Lift yourself up into a more refined, pure environment. Hear that still small voice. Make an offering. Draw close to God. Like re-energize,
Become
revitalize.
renewed. Become renewed.
New,
Say,
be
I
real
used to be
again.
like that. Now I'm
Yeah.
something completely different.
And then, with your spiritual loins girded again, go back out into the world and try to deal with what's going on out there. I mean, wouldn't it be nice if we had a place like that right now that was functioning? Wouldn't that be beautiful? He doesn't do it for you, animal, slaughter. Well, think about it, think again, because it may be the most humane, beautiful thing we can do in this world, and that is the order of the Korbanot, the offerings in the Holy Temple. Thanks for being with us, Temple Talk.